Hi, I'm Debbie Georgatos. Thanks for joining me today on America Can We Talk. Today we'll be talking truth about free markets proven fairest of them all again. Star Parker joins us to talk about Joe Biden's announcement and also the assault on America's discrimination laws, and finally left-wing censors on the warpath in America. And we'll always talk about why these stories matter to you. Stay tuned.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth.
And welcome again to America Can We Talk and to today's First Five. I'm Debbie Georgatos. I've been listening to many of the presidential candidates on the Democrat side lament about America's economy and make statements about how it'd just be so much better in America if we could be more like Europe. And I want to just spend the first five today hitting some vital data points that, instead of illusions and fairy tale ideas about how wonderful things could be or things are somewhere else, I want to talk about the reality, facts and data about America's economy, even for the poorest among us, as compared with the economies in Western Europe. So, Foundation for Economic Education came out with a piece called "Most of Europe is a Lot Poorer Than Most of the United States." We're going to hit three data points, really easy things to remember to tell your friends when you hear them lamenting, well, somehow things aren't fair here, and I'm hearing all the Democrat candidates for president saying somehow it's better in Europe. Number one, there is a chart which my incredibly wonderful producer Matt Stoker will put up for us in just a moment. It is a list relating to GDP data, and that is a comparison of economies around the world, GDP being gross domestic product, and this is per capita. So it means how much does a nation produce? How much does it produce through its laborers? So how productive is the economy? This is economic output, GDP list. It's a very lengthy list. I know even if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, you can't really read these numbers, but I wanted to have them up just to show you, and you can, when you watch this show later, you can take this chart down, or you can actually get it off of the article, which you can find on our website, americacanwetalk.org. The short story is, in terms of productivity, GDP, gross domestic product, per capita, per person, in America, with our 50 states we have here, we have the highest of any of the European nations ranks. This chart ranks top 50 states in America, most productive down to the least, and the highest country in Europe on gross domestic product and actual productive activity is Germany, which falls after the 38th state in America. So top state being number one, most productive, bottom state 50 being the least productive. Germany, Sweden, and Denmark are all below Missouri, below number 38. The UK is below West Virginia and below Mississippi. The 50th state in GDP, the least productive, fall the countries of Italy, South Korea, Spain, Greece, Portugal, Mexico, and China. The point of this first one is that productivity is not inspired, countries aren't productive. People don't work and produce in countries where the government simply controls and provides everything. Point number two, the measure of America's economy versus other economies in the world. And this is a chart, I again said, Matt, the happy producer, is going to put up in just a moment. The colors are kind of purple and yellow on it. It's called High Economic Cost of European Statism. The summary of this point is this. If you're trying to measure actual productivity, how does it feel to live in those countries? How wealthy do you feel? The OECD put out this chart, and you can grab it off the screen. You can find it in the articles linked on our page. The short summary is this. When the UN's agency, OECD, compares how prosperous is a country, how much money do people have to spend, how comfortable are they in where they're living because of the money they have, the OECD, the UN, adds everything up and sets 100 as the marker against which other countries are measured. Point being, in that big chart you're staring at, purple and yellow, the most, by far, comfortable country in the world to live in, the highest living standard is United States of America, by a landslide. America rates 147 in a scale of this 100 scale that the OECD produced. They also go through that data to make the point that the more government gets involved, the more government controls an economy, the less prosperity the people have. Regardless of the arguments of the left that somehow if you just give them power, give them the right to redistribute wealth, to take more money away from those mean, nasty, rich people and somehow make life fairer, the brutal reality of life is the bigger the government, the more control over the economy, the poorer people are. The less money they have to spend to live. The less money they have to spend to be comfortable. America ranking up there with #1, going down anyway. So you can read that chart later. I'm not going to read all the countries, but the point is the data does not bear out what the left-wing politicians in this country are telling you about how they're going to make everything fair and wonderful and somehow actually probably even utopian if we'll just give them power to control our economy. Third and last chart. And that is this information related to income inequality. One argument the leftists in this world make all the time is, well, even if everybody has enough money, even if it seems like it's okay, America is just horrible about income inequality. Again, facts matter, data matter, truth matters. In this happy chart up on the screen in front of you is basically making the point that the governments that control the economy more, that use the power of government to collect wealth, to redistribute wealth, have the worst problem with income inequality. Government-controlled economies cause income inequality. Freedom creates more equality. Freedom lifts up everyone. And this last chart was part of a study that was actually put out by the Credit Suisse. They did a global wealth report in 2014. And basically all those, you can see bars and numbers. The point they're making is the more government controls the economy, the worse for poor people. The more inequality is created. And one point they make, they're talking about why does everyone point to Scandinavia and say, gee, look how great life is there. Look at all this, look at all the social programs, the free programs. But Scandinavia has, the Scandinavian countries have among the highest inequality in all of Europe. The reason Credit Suisse attributes, I mean, there are obviously numerous reasons, but one central reason is this. When the Swedish government provides free things to people, so you can pretty much live off of your something like universal basic income, money coming into you for your food and your health care and your housing, there is a significant swath of the population perfectly content to stay at that level, to abandon any sense of drive, to build, to dream, to achieve, to create a company, to take risks, to grow their own personal wealth. So inequality grows because there are actually still people in those countries who are driven to success, who want to build companies, who want to build businesses, who want to take risks, and when they are successful, they earn money. They earn more money than the people who have decided to be content on what the government provided. And the reason I'm bringing this up today, and we'll be talking about this from now, probably till the end of time, but certainly until the end of the 2020 election cycle, is there are a great many lies told by the American left that somehow, if you'll just give them control of the economy in America, if you just let them redistribute wealth, just let them make things fairer, that they will end income inequality and they will make life better. And there is no economic data available to back up that lie. It's an absurdity, it's a falsehood, and American voters need to not only understand that, they need to be telling their 25 best friends that you're being fed a bill of goods when you're being told by leftists in this country that the way to get to utopia in America, the way to get to prosperity, the way to end income inequality is to give the government more power. The facts don't bear that out. I'm Debbie Georgatos. That was today's First Five. And now we're going to turn to an interview today with Star Parker. Should we have her on the phone? And She's been on the show numerous times. I'll just briefly remind you of her many accomplishments. She is the founder of CURE, which is based in Washington, D.C., the Center for Urban Renewal Education. She's a noted author. She's a very powerful figure in the Washington, D.C. legislative and policy-making arena. She assisted with when we did welfare reform in America. She assisted in that, and she's also the main reason I love talking with her and having her on, and the great work she's doing today is because she's bringing the message of freedom in America. She'll probably tell you more in a moment, but she's bringing the message of freedom in America, the virtues of hard work and relying on the American free market system and our Constitution and Christianity. All of those put together are the best vehicles to help low-income America lift themselves out of the challenges they face. So I believe we have her on the phone. Hi, Star Parker.
Hi. Yes, I'm on the phone.
So nice to have you. Thank you so much for joining me. She's also been given many awards, but I want to jump right in. There are two things I was hoping we could talk about. First of all, this is first Tuesday of the month, which is when we have Star joining us every month. It's just a treat for me, and I just I believe, a treat for our entire audience. Just great to have her on. Star, first I want to hit, though, you had a column out. You write wonderful columns. I urge everyone in our audience to read your columns and share them. But you talked about that Joe Biden, who announced his run for president, he announced, I guess it's now 2 weeks ago or 10 days ago, he announced his presidential campaign. Your caption says, Biden launched his presidential campaign with lies. And basically, I believe you're making reference to the comments he made about the whole protests in Charlottesville and comments he attributed to President Trump. But why do you say, just if you would tell us, why do you say that Biden launched his campaign based on lies?
Because he started his campaign in Charlottesville, if you will, on that particular question, because what we're going to see over the next 15, 18 months is a continuum of a narrative that the left has used for the last 50 years. Race, black, don't trust Republicans. So what Biden did was start a lie, but he's a liar. We've known that for a long time. But what he's trying to do is use that moment, his come out moment, to say that I am the voice for you African Americans that are trending toward President Trump. Please don't leave us. Don't forget what I told you when Barack Obama was running, that they're going to put you in chains. Of course, he forgot that it was the Democrats that put blacks in chains, but there was yet another lie. Let me give a few numbers, if I may, and why I wanted to challenge the former vice president and get ahead of this narrative that they plan to play against Republicans as we move into 2020. The reason is because the data is really clear that they are going to lose every state if they lose the black community. When you think about Republican and conservative values in our ethnic minority communities, you know, we have like 140 million Americans who come from ethnicities other than European. You got about 180 million that come from European ethnicity. So in that 140 million Americans who've now gone through public schools, have had 2 generations of hearing the lies of the left, here's what's breaking down numerically. In the Asian community, 29% of Asians poll as conservative, and 29% of Asians vote for Republicans. Then you look at the data in the Latino community. 29% of Hispanics poll as conservative, and 29% of Hispanics vote for Republicans. The challenge is when we look at the data in the black community, the challenge for the Republicans, for the conservatives. 22% of blacks poll as conservative, but only 8% vote as Republicans. So what's happening now is that 14% of African Americans who have been telling pollsters, we are conservatives, they are starting to hear more truth, have a little bit more money in their pocket because of President Trump. They're opening up to say, maybe I should consider these other ideas. We saw it in Florida on school choice issues. We're seeing it in very many states on the criminal justice reform that he's done. We've seen it now with the economic enterprise zones that he's established called now opportunity zones. So there's no government involved. It's just private investment. So they're listening. So the Democrats are in a dilemma, because if that 14% of African Americans shift and vote their values the same way that the Latinos and the Asians do, then the Democrats will lose every state and they will lose the presidency.
So this was it sounds like you're saying, not just an opportunistic, or it was an opportunistic choice of a theme for Biden as he launched his presidential campaign for 2020. He's trying to think, what do I say to get the black voters in this country to stick with the Democrat Party? Because what he was targeting was the Charlottesville protest over a statue of a Civil War era statue. And he attributed to President Trump his statement about fine people on both sides, as though President Trump was saying that there were fine people among the groups who were white supremacists or from the KKK. And that was really, and I believe your article was saying, but really a grotesque mischaracterization of what Trump said. Is that right?
And that's exactly, and the media continues with that narrative, and that's why I did my column to directly quote what the president said in the exact time that he said it. You can take a few words out of context if you want to and do all these late night shows and mock. But at the end of the day, this was very specific as a sitting president of the United States of America with a very specific issue at hand, which was that the city council in Charlottesville had voted and the mayor had signed into law that they were going to bring down a statue. People were upset about this, some on both sides. Some wanted it to remain, some didn't. Like all local communities have their own local issues. The others in the nation got involved, and a young woman lost her life over this particular situation. The sitting president of the United States of America had to calm that down, and he did an excellent job. They then started to take out of context what he said. I don't want to lose the bigger point, though, of why they're doing it. We're seeing it, all of this narrative out of all 20, 22, 25, 35 candidates that are now running for president to make themselves a national name. They're all specifically targeting that black vote for the very reasons that I just mentioned. That's why all of them are going into South Carolina. This is a game changer for the Democrats if they lose the black vote. And President Trump is polling in many credible polls at 30% numbers of support out of this community. If we can get that 14% to vote their values, he wins, and so does the Congress turns, and so does the Senate stay. So that's what's really on the table. It's not the little fires that they want to continue to set so that we have to run and put out. It is very deliberate to make sure that this community stays in fear that their votes are not being counted, fear that the Republicans are playing a game on them by purging the rolls of people that have dead or moved out of the state. Fear. And it started when this president started at Charlottesville.
Star, do you think that the advocacy by many of the Democrat presidential candidates for at least to contemplate reparations, to support a commission to look into reparations, do you see that as motivated by the same concern of the Democrat Party, just we have to get the black vote to stick with the Democrats, so we're going to talk about reparations?
Any and everything. We will hear any and every little bitty post point that they can interject fear, because they know what many conservatives don't know is that when you poll the African American community, what constantly comes up is that black people overwhelmingly do not feel secure in their person and property on a local level. And when you are not secure in your person and property on a local level, you can be afraid. You can get to a place where you think that maybe there is a role of bigger government, which is what we see when it comes to security issues, policing, criminal justice issues, is that African Americans, like 90% would prefer the feds handle this than their local government, because they do not trust local government. So because Democrats know this, they constantly are going to play fear, and they're going to play fear all the way to the election. Because when, at the end of the day, if a black person goes in a voting booth and they have to choose between the two, I've got a little bit more money in my pocket, but I'm just not sure if I'm going to be safe in my person and my property, even with that little bit of money in my pocket. Do I jump ship from what I've known for 50 years and go with something new? And that's what Democrats know, and that's why their strategy is going to, all the way through the 2020, be on issues of race. Every single one of them. From reparate, they're going to pull everything out of the head. They were already doing it, the voter stuff, as you mentioned, the reparations stuff, the what about this stuff, the what about that stuff. It's going to continue all the way through the election, and that's why I thought of an interest when Joe Biden started at Charlottesville. That's his narrative. That's where he's going, and he's going to try to have all of the other candidates come follow him on that same narrative, which he doesn't have to try too hard because they're already on that.
Star, I know I told you I wanted to talk today also about the Equality Act, but I do have one more question about this issue. So what if you are the strategist on the Republican side and you recognize exactly what you were just describing, that there is among the widespread within the black community in America, fear about personal safety, fear about the local police and other reasons to feel unsafe, and so you kind of want the federal government involved. How do Republicans answer that fear?
Well, it's always been the same answer, and they know it in business, and every businessman knows if you don't market your product, you're not going to get a sale. So, until the Republican Party gets serious about doing outreach specifically into these pockets of communities with their agenda and their ideas, it's, we can talk about it all day. But if you have a product you're selling, and in particular, if you're selling that product to a customer who's been with your opposition for 50 years, you don't go in there telling them how stupid they were for the last 50 years buying that particular product. You sell your product. You build a new model. And you work with the people that are with you that have been doing this for quite some time. President Trump understands this. He understands that 1.2 million African Americans went into that voting booth and voted for him. And that's the reason that he is working very aggressively with them to make sure that they just bring a friend next time. So, yeah, that question is just one that you constantly get. What do we do? What do we do? Everybody knows what to do who's ever been anywhere near a sales department, and that is that you go sell your product. It's knocking on doors like any and every salesman 101, salesmanship 101. Marketing 101, and that's something that until the Republican Party decides that they want to do, they'll keep crossing their fingers and hoping it works out in the end.
I love that answer, and I do actually. I'm grateful for the efforts President Trump is making and his belief in what you're describing, that you have to go into the communities. And on a broader level, I do feel like the Republican Party, we spend too much time in political conversation and debates talking about what's wrong with the other guy, which we do have to do. We have to point out what's wrong with the left-wing policies, what's wrong with the left-wing military policies, economic policies, immigration policy, but you still have to sell who we are, who the conservatives are, what pro-America means. And you've got, in many contexts, including the one we're describing. Okay. Well, I want to swift. I know you.
I want to say something
go ahead.
Because I think that you're absolutely right, and that's why I so appreciate your first five. We can yell about socialism all day, but until we point out the virtues of capitalism, we're just yelling about socialism. So it's absolutely true what you said. You have to define the problem, but then you better come up with the solution. And I think that too often we stop at the problem because we haven't thought all the way through what that solution should be. We saw that very clearly in the repeal and replace Obamacare discussion.
Yep. Oh boy. Yeah. And, even on the socialism issue, I've come to realize that it's very easy for conservatives to say, well, look at Venezuela, as though that is the entire argument. But many people say, well, we're not going to be Venezuela for a variety of reasons. They think they won't. But we're not really responding to what the left is saying was, well, they don't want me Venezuela either. They're saying, but we're kind of like Denmark or Sweden or list your country. And so you've got to talk about what is being presented by the left as the utopia, as the answer, and then point out where the data just do not bear out what the left is claiming it does. I couldn't agree. Yeah.
Exactly right. And we don't actually have to go abroad. We can look into their own districts. We can look into any and every distressed zip code in this country and see what happens when the government controls their health care, their education, their housing, and their economic stability. All of the districts of all of the people that are now trying to drag the rest of the country into socialism are in charge of these communities to where government already controls everything, and they're left wanting. There's just no way that we can say that quarter of the budget that we've been spending for the last 50 years on these anti-poverty programs has worked. Government has controlled absolutely everything in these distressed communities, $900 billion a year, $22 trillion since the war on poverty began. And just show me one success in all of the Congressional Black Caucus districts. Just show me one community that absolutely self-corrected as a result of their policies. No, it not only gets worse, people leave. All of the real money leaves, and then they end up in even more distress. If we need to be reminded of what happened in Detroit, even though under their Republican leadership, they've been able to turn Detroit back around. But Detroit bled. I mean, they had 1.5 million people living there, and almost overnight they dropped to 500,000 because money's fungible. It's going to make more of itself, and it will leave your area if it has to. Most Americans do not want to pick up and move from the home of their grandparents, but they will if they're starving. And this is the reason reason that policies of the right have always worked because we believe in capitalism and free markets.
Absolutely true. I'm glad we stayed on that topic. I just want to turn briefly. I know that you have a busy schedule today, but I want to hit one other topic if we can, and that is in Washington, D.C., the Democrats who now have the majority in the U.S. House are talking and pushing a bill called the Equality Act. And in simplest terms, the Equality Act would be an amendment to federal law. Currently, federal anti-discrimination law says it outlaws for employers discriminating against people based on their race, sex, and national origin. And so it is the idea that it was an outcome of the civil rights movement. It was an effort to say we're going to really work to bring all Americans into the land of opportunity, land of joining the free market, join the working world. And so it was giving some teeth to the effort to say you can't discriminate based on race, sex, national origin. Well, the Equality Act, it proposed but now by the Democrats, wants to add to that list of groups, of protected classes, they want to add sexual orientation and gender identities. They put those two terms together, SOGI, sexual orientation, gender identity, SOGI. They want to add SOGI to the Equality Act. And the most amazing thing happened in Washington. You talk about politics creating strange bedfellows. The left-wing Women's Liberation Front, which they call themselves WOLF as their nickname, which is very left-wing, and on the conservative side, the Concerned Women for America, CWA, both came together to oppose this Equality Act because they say ultimately it will hurt women. I will tell you in a moment our listeners more about why they say this would hurt women. But Star, I want to know your take on what do you think about adding sexual orientation and gender identity to the federal protected classes in our federal discrimination laws?
Well, since you're a regular reader of my column, you'll find that tomorrow in your inbox will be the column I just sent to creators to distribute to my sites that reach about 7 million people. It is about this Equality Act. And the reason you saw those two groups come together, as you're saying, you'll discuss a little later, when it comes to, some of the social agenda of women, they agree that if you have a bunch of trans in, you name it, sports, any place that women are competing, it waters that area. But make no mistake, this is bigger than that. This is a direct attack against the biblical worldview in our society in the public square. This is, if this passes, if this becomes law, if you are a Christian, you are now out of business. Just matter of fact, there is no way that a Christian will be able to survive if this act becomes law. This is a direct assault against every church in this society, every Christian business in this society. We already have city councils voting to keep Chick-fil-A's out of their airports because of the worldview of the owner. You start allowing for the Civil Rights Act to read that if someone is trans, you must accommodate in every single service area. We're out of business. Christians will not be working in the public square when it comes to our police forces, when it comes to our education systems. Any and every structure will be turned upside down when it comes to someone that adheres to a biblical worldview even in their private life. It's just incredible that they are getting away with this. They're disguising it as it's suicidal, frankly, and they're disguising it as an effort to help heal a problem that really doesn't exist because they really just want to replace any and every Christian worldview in our public square with this new secular mantra of LGBTQ.
I completely agree with everything you just said. I want to add one other little point and then get back to the point that you're making. But this is, again, left-wing politics based on defining a victim, causing people to agree that there's a victim class who's been mistreated, and then getting people sympathetic to that notion of this creation of victim class. So vote for us, vote for the libs, vote for the big government Democrats, because we're going to fix it. Is that the pattern used over and over and over: identify a victim, create outrage, which there really isn't outrage except in a minuscule portion of America on this issue, but it is create a victim, create outrage, and then vote for us because we'll swoop in and save you. But to the larger, more important point that you're making, it is another assault just on the Judeo-Christian roots of America. It is one party truly taking the side of what is the right term, confrontational, aggressive attack on the Christian worldview. It is the idea that they're saying you can't hold that worldview, this Christian worldview, and live it out in America anymore. And so there is a, go ahead. Yeah.
No, in the public square. No, you're absolutely right. And actually, 2 points. One, there are victims, and this is the difference between creating one. The Bible is very clear on this issue, and so you're going to have pastors and parents teach contrary to the LGBTQ community. So therefore, that's the two groups that have to be brought in by law. You have to have it so that pastors are not saying over pulpits that homosexuality is a sin, and you have to have parents not teach it to their children, meaning that in the school systems all rules need to be rewritten. And so what will begin to happen over time is you will not be able to send your children to private schools that teach that homosexuality is sin, because that private school will not get an accreditation. This is extremely serious. They're already pulling in on accreditation. The Christian community is all over the map on this Equality Act, to where they're trying to get themselves exempted out in certain places, so they're stumbling over each other, as opposed to saying, wait just a minute, let's not get away from the bigger challenge. We are in war, and this particular secular worldview wants to replace the biblical worldview in our society, and we have to take it on. And it is very aggressive, and they will become victims because anyone can say they're a victim when somebody tells them no. And this one we must say no to, or you will not be able to escape sending your kid to a private Christian school, because the private Christian school won't have an accreditation, and you will not be able to get a medical degree and a science degree or a law degree from any major university, because you won't be accepted in that university if you have this particular worldview. You don't believe me? Google the name Crystal Dixon. Ask Crystal Dixon, after moving herself all the way up the echelon on this particular issue at the University of Toledo, if when she finally, on her own dime, on her own time, wrote a letter to the editor of the paper, if she didn't lose her job and all benefits and has spent the last 5 years in court trying to at least not be in the poverty line. No, this list is getting very, very, very long in this particular war. So if people think that it's not serious, it will come out of the House, and it might pass the Senate. And if it does pass the Senate, the president will probably sign it. So we better fight now to make sure that the Civil Rights Act is not expanded to include what God calls sin.
That is a stellar summary of the incredible consequences that could flow from this passage of the Equality Act. And I do think that you are very outspoken. I'm sure you've heard that before. You are very outspoken in your worldview and your confidence in it and what it means, and applying it to your assessment of policies and ideas. I think there are, and you're relatively rare. I mean, there are more people realizing if you don't speak up now, in this era, in this time, your opportunity to do that will be lost. I mean, once we have the changes you're describing, you have this Equality Act pass the House, pass the Senate, and get signed into law, it's too late then to say, wait a minute, I want to be able to talk about the Christian worldview. I want to be able to teach that in this Christian private school where I would like my kids to go. I want it to be accredited. I want them to. This is the intolerance of the American left that is just an ongoing march to saying no worldview except the left-wing worldview is permitted to be aired, is tolerable, is to be accepted in this country. And it is, I'll give a little tease for the next segment, I'm going to talk about some ongoing examples of this relentless intolerance of the American left against anything that they do not, that is different from how they see things. Star Parker, thank you for joining me today at America Can We Talk. Love having you on.
You're welcome. I look forward to next month.
I do too. Thanks so much. And folks, that was Star Parker. Oh, Star, if you're still there, your organization is CURE, and the website is urbancure.org.
Urbancure.org. Yeah, urbancure.org.
I urge our listeners, go to that website, read her thing, subscribe to her columns. She is a warrior for all of us. Again, thank you so much, Star.
Thank you.
And finally today, I want to turn to, very relevant, based on the conversation we just had with Star Parker, I'm going to turn to the last story for today, or kind of theme for today, which has to do with left-wing censorship and censors on the war in this country, on the warpath in this country. What Star Parker just laid out is exactly what will flow from this idea of legitimizing and accepting the LGBTQ agenda, the SOGI as protected classes within the anti-discrimination laws in this country. You will not be able to have the robust conversation that's supposed to be part of Western civilization, the robust free speech that we're supposed to be able to have on topics related to marriage and all of life. You will be more and more dictated by the secular worldview that simply will not tolerate Christian views. That's just one example. But when I talk about the ongoing censorship of the American left, they are on the warpath. I'm going to give you 3 quick stories, and then when the reason I'm doing this is, as Star said in our previous segment, you have to fight now. You can't wait until the left-wing mindset, the absolutely intolerant anti-American left, gets their way and then think you're going to fight them. The fight will be over. The SOGI thing is crazy, and there is political correctness in this country that encourages people on the right to say, well, you know, we can kind of talk about taxes, we can talk about immigration, we can talk about, you know, funding the military and having adequate national defense, but these are tender issues, and this whole thing of wading into the sexual orientation and gender identity things, these are more emotional, and we might turn people away. Folks, this is the militant American left is using the SOGI argument, the SOGI group, as they use all other minority groups, to push the left-wing control of America, abandon your liberties agenda. I'm going to tell very quick three stories of just examples of the censorship of the American left is on the march. Number 1 is there's a lawyer in the state of Indiana, and this, by the way, you can read these stories at our website at americacanwetalk.org. Homepage, under shows, go down, list of links, and read these stories yourself. One is a lawyer in a small town, called Lake County, Indiana. And in that town, he grew up there. He now lives there. He's a lawyer. He'd been practicing law. There was an opening on a local court, a state court. And in their area, those openings are filled by commission making recommendations. Ultimately, the governor decides. This guy has been a stellar, recognized by his peers, civil litigation attorney, and he decided to look into pursuing this judgeship. So there's a commission that looks into it. Well, the left-wingers in that area looked into blog posts that he'd written in college. He wrote for a college newspaper. He wrote some blogs after that. Hasn't written in a few years. His blog posts were on topics like his views on immigration and illegal immigration and being pro-life and making fun of radical feminism and warning about radical Islam. They were published in places like the National Review, a very revered and not extremist website. National Review, Breitbart, Blaze. So those columns he wrote were gathered up by the left-wing opposition to his becoming a judge. They mailed it first to the members of the commission who make the recommendation to the governor who should get this slot. That didn't carry weight with that commission, so they kept his name on the short list. Then they mailed it to all the local Democrat attorney and the governor's staff. Still, still his name remained on the list. And still no controversy. So then they finally mailed it to the Urban League of Gary, the Indiana chapter of the NAACP, the Urban League, the Mayor Freeman Wilson of Gary, and the local Hispanic Bar Association and the local Black Bar Association. These are people who are agitating every group they can find, every left-wing group they can find, to say this guy shouldn't get to be a judge because he dared to write things that don't agree with the left-wing worldview. He dared to write things that support pro-life, that challenge illegal immigration, that expose the threat of radical Islam. They caused him ultimately to have his name withdrawn. The governor chose someone else. This is a Republican governor who wanted to choose a Republican person, but this left-wing mob drove him out of consideration. Worse yet, within a week after this decision, he can't get that judgeship. His own law firm called him in to say, you know, we're really sorry to tell you this, but we have clients who say that they complained about my political views and that told the law firm they will no longer do business with the law firm so long as he is employed there. So he lost his job too. I'm telling you, the left wing in this country is militant. They fight everything to the death. They are about destroying America. Star Parker was exactly right talking about the depth of tyranny in the mindset of the American left. They will not stop until all conservative thought, all Christian worldviews are shut down. And you cannot fight them by ignoring them. You can't fight them by sticking your head in the sand. You have to fight them by speaking up. Two other really great examples. One was George Soros funds, unfortunately, with millions and billions of dollars, funds every anti-American left-wing cause you have ever heard of. He funded a group called the Poynter Institute, Poynter, and they came out with a announcement on April 30th, a list of websites that they claim to have vetted and researched, and these websites were all to be ignored and treated as fake news, all unreliable, all dishonest. I mean, they were trying to smear, it was 29 or 30 conservative websites, only because the brilliant Brent Bozell of Media Research Center recognized what they were doing, tweeted about it, made a fuss, that this organization, Poynter, took the list back down off their website and said they had to review their vetting procedures and standards. The point is, Soros-style thinking, Soros money will shut down conversation in this country, will shut down conservatism in this country. It is not a joke. It is not a game. It is not practice. It is not some other life, some other place. This is happening in your country, America. Last story, very briefly. There's a brilliant organization, the Claremont Institute. They put out the Claremont Review of Books. They have stellar authors. I mean, serious, substantive, conservative, serious thinking authors. Google tried to financially strangle them by not allowing them to advertise on Google, for they have an upcoming, their annual event. They have a speaker. This time I think they have Mike Pompeo speaking. Google tried to say Claremont Institute was not allowed to advertise. This would be, I can't even tell you an analogy. This is a serious, substantive, not hothead, not far right, not extreme, serious intellects being told by Google. And the reason Google does this is because they are part of the left-wing cabal trying to shut down speech in this country. And my friends, if you don't speak up now, if you don't fight now, if you don't write, you have to be writing letters to your editor, you have to be posting on Twitter, on Facebook, wherever you are, wherever you have the ability to express yourself. We need to be demanding of Congress that Google and YouTube and Twitter, all those folks, have some kind of oversight from Congress, because censorship they create is censorship. No one can fight individually. And now, for the closing of our show every day, I want to talk with you about why all the stories we talked about today matter to you. We'll start with why the EU countries, in the beginning of the show, the lefties in this country, left-wing Democrat presidential candidates, all talking about Europe is the utopia, look how great it is, we could be better, blah, blah, blah. Every single way you would measure the data, America and freedom and free markets is better. So economic data of the EU countries, per capita, per person, GDP versus the United States. Germany, Sweden, Denmark, and Belgium are in the bottom third of the 50 states in America. UK and France are below number 47, West Virginia. Italy, Spain, Portugal, Greece, below number 50, Mississippi. Next slide, please, my happy friend. The EU countries have weak economies. It matters because socialism separates reward from work. Socialism destroys incentive and productivity. Remember what Credit Suisse said about why the Scandinavian countries have such huge income inequality, because people who can live off of the government lose the incentive to work. This is Economics 101. Free markets versus socialism is no contest. Free markets always produce stronger economies. EU envy is bogus, bogus from the Democrats. Reject it. Next slide. The Equality Act, we were talking with Star Parker about that today. These are non-discrimination laws intended to protect people on race and national origin and gender. These are things you are born as. They work best as to objective, immutable characteristics, race, gender, country of origin, national origin. If they're based on behavior or thoughts, behavior of the American left, behavior of the LGBTQ, choices that people make in their lifestyle, we open a Pandora's box of legal mischief and political agendas. And as Star Parker correctly pointed out, the Christian worldview will be smothered, will be done. You cannot function in America if this Equality Act passes. This Equality Act, SOGI, sexual orientation, gender identity, it's profoundly anti-women. We didn't even go into those examples, but women in competitions, in athletic competitions, are losing to men who are posing as women. Women being forced to shower in locker rooms next to people who are men. They simply are men. They are anatomical men. It'll officially open the floodgates of men competing as women in every sport and showering in every locker room. Dozens more of consequences than we could even list here. Americans don't want. It's a violation of common sense. Tell your congressman, tell your senator today. Last slide, please. I believe it's the last slide. Okay, why this matters to you, this totalitarian censorship. The left rejects the idea of God and the idea that transcendent truth exists. Therefore, the left rejects our Bill of Rights. You don't have the right to say anything that the left-wing world does not agree with. They reject freedom of speech. They reject freedom of religion. They do not tolerate dissenting views. They behave like a mob, threatening, intimidating, destroying whoever dares to disagree. And now the last slide, left-wing totalitarian censorship ongoing in America. It is all about controlling, when you think about Google, controlling the research, the results of the research on the web. It's a major step toward control of what the searcher knows. If the people like Google can control what people know, it's a major step toward controlling what people think. Thought control, controlling what you know and think, is the hallmark of totalitarian government, the antithesis of a free society. My friends, I'm Debbie Georgatos. This is America Can We Talk. Tune in every Monday through Thursday, 3 p.m. Central Time, right here on Facebook Live, on YouTube. And I would love to hear from you. Email me at americacanwetalk@gmail.com. Subscribe to the YouTube page, like this Facebook page, share my postings, and be part of the army of patriots speaking up for America, because America matters.
America, can we talk? Truth about America.
Can you